What is up, you beautiful people? Welcome back to the Built on Bitcoin podcast, where we cover all the innovation happening across the Bitcoin ecosystem. So typically you'll find me talking directly to the builders and founders, creating new use cases and extending the use of Bitcoin. What that means is here I cover the whole ecosystem as first-class citizens. So obviously Bitcoin main chain is in that mix, Lightning for sure, but also Stacks, Liquid, RSK, and anything else I find is super, super interesting. So today I have a fantastic episode with Philip Smedt, who is one of the core contributors of Arkadiko Finance, a stablecoin protocol built on Stacks, and has a bunch of collateral types, Stacks, XBTC, but they got some big stuff coming online to be able to use native BTC and take out loans against it in a decentralized way. So we cover a ton of topics, things like, why are stablecoins not so stable? Interesting answer to that. I was also curious, why, with so many Bitcoiners having an aversion to tokens, as an early builder in the Stacks ecosystem, but also a self-described Bitcoiner, why was he okay with this gas token and a bunch of other stuff? He gives his take on what he sees as the four main ecosystems that exist in the crypto space. So yeah, this one was fascinating. Super, super interesting cats. And yeah, you'll hear at the end, he's open to talk to anybody. So if you want to connect with him, for sure reach out. But before we jump in, quick word from our sponsor. So if you haven't been paying attention, which if you listen to this podcast, it's hard not to, Ordinals have been going crazy. It's only been 2 months really since they've launched, and we've seen some big launches from some big NFT collections. Volume is on the rise. Tooling for Bitcoin is going crazy with partially signed Bitcoin transactions, marketplaces, APIs, indexes, bunch of stuff. So Ordinals are going crazy. The first Ordinals conference is coming, and it's happening during the Bitcoin Miami kind of week when everyone's going to descend to Miami. So May 18th, Ordinals 2023, the first ever Ordinals conference is going down. Big speakers coming to present and chit chat. Casey Rodarmor, Trevor Owens, Wertheimer, Eric Wall, Nick Carter. There's a whole list. I recommend check out ordinals2023.com. And if you want to save yourself some money, you can use my discount code to save $25. Go to ordinals2023.com/tickets and use code ORD23JKBLCK to save that money. So ORD23JKBLCK to save $25. So I hope to see you there. I'll definitely be in town. But without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Philip Smedt, core contributor to Arkadiko Finance.
Welcome to Built on Bitcoin.
Philip, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. I've been to Stacks for a couple of years now, and I think you're firmly classified as a Stacks OG for sure. So I appreciate you coming on. But for people that don't know you, like, I can never tell my audience. I started as a Stacks podcast. Now it's more Bitcoin focused. So I don't know if stackers know you, but maybe the other people don't. So just give us a quick overview of what's your background.
Yeah. By the way, I think there's a surprising amount of people that I still follow every now and then, mostly from the Stacks NFT space, that also don't follow me. So I think if they're, watching this, they'll be surprised. Who the hell is this guy? So happy to give a quick intro. But I have a technical background first and foremost. Always been really interested in technology. Pretty boring life, but in the good sense, I would say. My youth was perfect. I had a great childhood. Grew up in the north of Europe, Western Europe, middle class family. My my parents. Well, my father, he's always had his own company, and I used to work there in the summers. And back then, I was already saying, yeah, I want to go into technology. His company was logistics, boring stuff with like repairing containers and stuff like that. I didn't really care much about that. I always wanted to go like Mountain View, California to work at Google. That was my big dream when I was 15. I did actually apply at Google. I failed all the interviews, never got a big tech job. But I did study computer science, so that's my I got a master's degree there. And as I said, I failed interviews at Facebook, Google, at any big company I think you can imagine, unfortunately. And then I decided to just go into freelancing. And that's really where I started having fun and how I eventually around 2013 got more interested in crypto and Bitcoin in general.
Okay. And just to place us timeline wise, when did you get your master's in CS?
That must have been I graduated around 2011. 2011. Yeah.
Okay. And so you were in tech for a few years. When I guess let's start with what fascinated you about crypto. So you've been in tech for a couple years after college. You see it pop up on Hacker News or maybe Namecoin or something, whatever it is. What initially drew you to Bitcoin that you found so fascinating?
You actually nailed it. I read Hacker News a lot. Not that much anymore these days, but back in 2011, 2012, a lot. And I think it was April 2013 when I first read something on Hacker News that said Bitcoin hits, I don't know what it was, $100 or something like that. So in the cycle of 2013, not all the way at the beginning, but not super late either. It hit $100. I can't remember again or the first time, but anyway, I saw it and I was like, okay, whatever, this thing called Bitcoin. And so there's this rule, or at least I have some friends that tell me that there's this rule that you have to hear about a concept for like 3 to 5 times from different people, right? Or different angles. And so that was once I heard some other, tech friends talk about it. But I kind of rejected it until it popped up again on Hacker News, and it kept popping up and up. And I was like, okay, I really need to look into this stuff. And so most of the things that I'm working on these days come actually honestly from speculation and from having fun. So I saw this thing rally from like $100 to I think it was $800. And then I was like, God damn, I need to get into this stuff. And so I kind of bought the top more or less. It rallied further to $1,100 in 2013. But I would love to give you this interesting story how I started hacking on Namecoin and contributing Go, but that's not really it. I just thought, oh, this is fun. I'm gonna buy some of my savings. I'm gonna put in there. And then I was living in Spain and Barcelona at the time, and there were Bitcoin meetups going on. That was end of 2013. And I went to some of them, and people were building like Bitcoin ATMs and doing fun stuff. And then, actually, in the beginning of 2014, Dogecoin got launched. So, for those who don't know what Dogecoin exactly is, but it's a fork of Litecoin. So, you had Litecoin, which was the silver to Bitcoin being gold. And then someone thought that was funny, and they forked Litecoin and they created Dogecoin. And I was really into Dogecoin actually in the beginning of 2014. I gave talks about Dogecoin. I still have the presentation. Um, Probably like being looked down upon by some, but especially I guess the Bitcoin maxis, right? But again, for me, it was all about fun. And I actually aped in all my Bitcoin one night into Dogecoin like a few days after it launched. And it like tripled or something. And then I round tripped it back. And I was like, oh shit. But so I guess the point is something needs to be fun for me to really get engaged, whether that's through speculation or technical curiosity or something else. If it's not fun, it's hard for me, to really get into it. And that's for me the real rabbit hole rather than, oh, what is money and what is gold? And we go back to a gold standard. I really wasn't like reading about that or thinking about it back in 2013, 14.
Got it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and that's part of the thing that I've been trying to bring to my brand of Bitcoiner, if you will. It's why I open every episode with like, "What is up, you beautiful people?" It's because people take it too damn serious, like, and obviously finances are very important. So, like and Bitcoin is trying. There's a big adversary that we're going against in the traditional system. So it's like give it the proper due, but also don't make it so damn bland and boring that you turn off people or you can strike that balance. Um, I will say it's interesting as people. I talked to more people about that question, and it's the minority is people who weren't tech backgrounds. They just had product marketing or whatever, and they're at the right place at the right time. But most people were tech back then, and they've gotten to crypto. I'm assuming that if you're reading Hacker News, you're already kind of a nerd, and if you're to buy Bitcoin back then, was the barrier so high that you almost had to be kind of techie to even get your hands on any amount of BTC, or was there starting to be stuff that was like kind of remotely okay to use?
I think when I got in, it was really a lot easier just in those past few months between, let's say, February of 2013 and November. You had Bitstamp, which is still running and, operational up to this day. And I think it used to be one of the best, spot exchanges in Europe, if not in the world. I think they have a bank license in Luxembourg. I actually shilled them to all my friends. Look, go to Bitstamp if you want to own something. I know you need to self custody, but a lot of people that I know, they just bought Bitcoin and they still have it sitting on Bitstamp, which is the easy solution for most people. If I tell them you need to buy a ledger, a Trezor, put it on there, I go, it's really a lot too far. They're willing to put a few €100 or dollars in, but make it easy. And so I think it was easy enough to buy it, but to take real custody of it was pretty hard. And I never did it, to be honest, until 2018, 2019.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And I went on a little mini tangent there, but it sounded like you might have had some thoughts on kind of making Bitcoin fun again and like having that kind of culture.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Look, I think in general, I also went down the rabbit hole. In 2019, I started looking more like reading about money, what is money, and like the medium of exchange and store of value and all that stuff. But I think ultimately, what you have to think is money is some form of time, right? You create more time if you have more money. Because I can just say, imagine it can be something stupid between quotes, but maybe I don't want to do the dishes and I'm a very rich guy, for instance, and I hire a maid or something, it could be as simple as that. And I think owning Bitcoin from a serious point of view is the easiest way to buy yourself more time without understanding all those things like, oh, it has to be, a store of value and it's disinflationary and all those things. And I think that's the value prop of Bitcoin. But again, what you just said, I don't think that necessarily attracts tons of builders, to the Bitcoin space. And so maybe I'm wrong, but the product market fit that I see for the most sticky projects or products or protocols, whatever you call it, is that they are fun. And you see that with ordinals now. Ordinals are, and I'm gonna piss off people maybe, but ordinals are stupid. They're JPEGs on a piece of limited space, right? But they are fun. I love looking at, for instance, you have this profile picture, which is an ordinal on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, or at least at the time we're recording it. Now you can't change it anymore. But you do have one of those megapunks, and the megapunks are minted as ordinals, and they're fun, right? And that brings more people into the game, that exposes them. Not saying the NFTs are our way to mass adoption, even though I do think it is, or they are. But yeah, if we can see that cultural shift also happening to DeFi in some extent, then I think we can gain ground on the normies. A normie in general, I don't mean anything bad with it, but they're not interested in crypto. They're just like, leave me alone with your stupid JPEGs or your DeFi stuff that gets hacked every week. Just let me live my life. But if you give them a certain value prop, or if you can make them aware that something is fun, that gets a lot easier. And again, I think we're getting closer to that cultural shift, starting with the ordinal stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking to me. So everyone says that like that crypto is narrative driven, which it clearly is, especially in the speculative asset stuff. But up until 2 months ago, working on Bitcoin L1 felt like completely inaccessible. Like Bitcoin Core is like they're the angels of Bitcoin. No one touches that stuff. Uh, getting your code PR'd into Bitcoin Core is like, oh my God, you're an elite hacker. And now it's like everybody's talking about PSBTs and working on extending Bitcoin L1. It's I don't know. It's just crazy how fast that's happened with one small change with ordinals.
Yeah, for sure. And look, there's two ways to look at this, right? From the one hand, I think it makes sense to hack on it because it's small. What is Bitcoin? 400 billion, 500 billion. I really get triggered when someone says it's $1 trillion asset, by the way, because that was 2 years ago. But so it's like 400 billion or something, and it's really tiny. And so I'm one of the people who thinks that we should keep on doing soft forks and make changes relatively easy. But I think with this ordinal stuff, which happens, no one really suspected that this was a use case, through Taproot and all those things. That was not really what people expected in a certain group. Now, I think will make it even harder to do soft forks in the future, which is not great. So I think there's probably, in my head at least, it's fairly binary. You have people who block more soft forks in the future and who are against it. And yes, I mean, Bitcoin is something really important, and I think it will continue to be important in the serious sense, right? That it can save us from counterparty risk, et cetera, as we see these days with the banks and all the stuff that's going on. At the same time, I think if we don't keep on experimenting, how can we build Bitcoin layers, right? Then that gets pretty hard. So it's a tough decision, but ultimately, I think we should take the risk and keep on experimenting. Because if no one ever had experimented, maybe we wouldn't even see Bitcoin, right? I mean, maybe it wouldn't have been there. So what's the point? And ultimately, I think as humans, we need to evolve, right? By all means, let's keep fucking things up. I can swear here, right? Or
Whatever. Yep. Totally. 100%. I love it. I love it. Okay. I want to there's so much to discuss. I want to get into how you transitioned into Bitcoin from your traditional space, and I want to talk about Arkadiko, but maybe I'll take a step back first and ask what is kind of like an existential question, which sounds funny on the surface, but we have banks are failing, fiat debases, stable coins not so stable, and so that's my first question. As a creator of USDA, trying to create what you think is the best protocol broadly, why are stable coins not stable?
That's a great and very difficult question. I'll maybe take a step back and start with talking about different groups of stablecoin that we generally see these days. And so the first ones are, in my opinion, probably one of the most reliable ones today, which are the centralized ones. Ironically, USDC, USDT. I know USDC just depegged for a while, but I think they're still probably the safest out there because they have a real claim on the dollar, whether that dollars it's in true cash or cash equivalents, as people say, in treasuries that are hopefully short-term dated. But that's, in my opinion, if you trust a central counterparty, then they're pretty safe in terms of stability, I think. The second one that I think might still be very important in the future are what USDA is as well, which is collateral backed by crypto collateral. So you have some collateral, whether that's Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana or something else, and you put that in a smart contract. And against that collateral, you can mint some stable coins. The biggest and most famous one is MakerDAO, which has DAI, which is on Ethereum. And then the third one, and no one has really nailed this so far, are pure algorithmic ones that are either only partly backed or not backed at all. Most famous one is, UST with Luna, which is not backed at all, right? People say it's backed by Luna, but I mean, what is backing? Right? Backing is really when you can. It's actually a good question. What is backing, right? In my opinion, Luna did not back USD, and it had this circular design where you could burn one USD, which was $1, to get $1 in Luna, and the other way around. And then so that created this existential risk in the whole system. And I can talk a bit more about that after. But in my opinion, the two that we really need to rely on are the centralized ones and the crypto collateralized ones. And the reason they're not stable is because I believe it has to do with liquidity. Because the designs, they're fairly sound. They're good. You can redeem USDC for $1, but not often in the weekend or not always in the weekend because banks are closed in the weekend and the redemptions arrive and you need to wait until Monday. And liquidity on chain is fairly low, right? There's maybe, I'm just going to throw out a number, 40 billion or 50 billion USDC. But what fraction of that lives on chain? If you go to Curve, which is a stable swap protocol, then maybe a few 100 million is present in those pools. Meaning if you have a few 100 million or people collectively dump a few 100 million in those pools of the other stablecoin, imagine you have a pool of USDC and USDT and everyone all of a sudden wants to go out of USDC. So they're all dumping their USDC for USDT. And that destabilizes the whole pool, right? And if something destabilizes because it's low liquidity, obviously the price of one goes up a lot versus the other, and your pool is not balanced any longer. I guess I hope that makes sense. And so that essentially happens in the past weekend. Everyone wanted to rush out of USDC, so they started dumping all their USDC in the places that made the most sense, which is Uniswap V3 and Curve. And so everyone wanted that USDT, and that brought imbalance in the peg of USDC. And then you started seeing it go down. But if you really believe, obviously, the reason that everyone wanted USDT at that point is because they believed that Circle might, go down because Silicon Valley Bank had some, duration mismatch issues. But ultimately, Circle made it pretty quickly, even the same weekend. And so I think the panic around USDC was really unwarranted because even if they had lost those 3 billion that were at Silicon Valley Bank, that's a fraction. They were partly insured, first of all, and they were never lost. There was a mismatch in duration of bonds. So it was never really lost. Maybe a part was lost, but if you take the fraction of what was lost against total supply and the revenue that Circle does as a company, then that panic was really unwarranted. That's like maybe less than 1% or something. If you take less than 1%, the real value of the intrinsic value, let's say, of USDC should have still been 99.5.6 cents or something like that. We can do the calculation on paper, but it was 88 cents or 85 cents or something at one point. And that was a real arbitrage opportunity. So I think, honestly, it was just a lot of panic due to low liquidity in those pools on DeFi, why USDC depegged. And by Monday, a few days ago, we saw that USDC had regained its peg already. So there were a ton of redemptions. I think yesterday on Tuesday, we saw a $700 million redemption. So $700 million in one go of USDC was burned for dollars. And so still a lot of people lost trust, right? They're like, oh, it lost its peg for 3 days. I don't want to hold this thing anymore. And that's fair. There's a trust issue, and then there's a liquidity issue, and then the way it operates as a whole, right? But I believe fundamentally how it operates as a whole, if you trust the US, if you trust the bond system, if you trust the banks, to some extent, I think USDC is fine. But again, it's all about liquidity and short-term volatility. And that's actually the same reason that something like USDA, which is crypto collateralized, can go off peg as well. If people start dumping USDA on chain en masse, then there's a lot of sell pressure on USDA and it can't hold its $1 peg anymore versus something else that it's pegged against. And so it's really a game of liquidity usually. And so those two designs that I talked about, the centralized one and crypto collateralized ones, they're both great designs. Obviously, you have smart contract risk in one and counterparty risk in the other, as I just talked about. But they're not broken in design as most algorithmic stablecoins are. They have been proven. There's billions of liquidity in it versus algorithmic ones. Most of them have failed. So yeah, I know I've been rambling for like 10 minutes about this, but why are stablecoins not stable? It's because, again, it's a combination of trust and liquidity usually, where bad things between quotes happen. And that way, it loses its peg either temporarily or permanently. And last thing I'm going to say is, as a founder of a stablecoin DeFi protocol, I ultimately believe that Bitcoin is the stablecoin in the way we should exchange value. But people need something to anchor themselves to. And for better or for worse, today that's the US dollar. And I think to get there, and maybe it takes another 100 years, right, before we get to like a real Bitcoin standard. We need something, in the meantime that people can use to have a circular economy. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Interesting. You've opened up so many cans of worms. I'm not sure where to start. I will just to recap. So there's three main types: centralized, which is backed literally by a dollar. Typically, it's the US dollar, and USDC is by far the biggest one. You have collateralized, which is something like Arkadiko, and typically they're over collateralized, I'm assuming, and so you get some inefficiency in capital. If you do it one to one, that's dangerous for liquidations for the person who's holding that stable coin. Is that right? Like you wouldn't really see a collateralized one to one stable coin because it wouldn't stay very stable.
Yeah, correct. So you do see some that are nearly 1 to 1, but that's usually like USDC to mint DAI or something like that. And what's the point of that, right? That kind of beats the purpose of having an on-chain decentralized stablecoin.
Got it. And then there's algorithmic, which is just a bunch of wizardry and incentives and game theory trying to keep the peg at its place. You mentioned backing though, which I've never thought about. The definition of backing, what is it? Is it the ability to redeem? So it's the asset that's backing it, and then the ability to redeem kind of defines, is it really backed by that thing? Is that way to think about it?
I mean, look, there's no formal official definition, right? But for me, backing means that there is transparency in the sense that an asset indeed is always there if I want to redeem it. And for Luna, for instance, you would mint and burn those things, and they were not locked up or not there in a smart contract at all times. If you mint one USDA, you need usually at least 1.4 to $1.5 in STX or MBTC, and you can actually audit the smart contracts on our platform. We have this little analytics page where you can go and look at how many STX tokens are there, how many STX of those are liquid, meaning they're not stacked in proof of transfer right now, how many are illiquid, how many are stacked. You can do the same for auto alex, which is a collateral type that we use, in XBTC today. So everything is very transparently backing those USDA on chain, and for me that's the big advantage, because why did these bank runs happen? They didn't necessarily happen because those banks were, in my opinion, at least, completely done for. I mean, they were definitely insolvent and they have issues as we see. But if we could see how much is illiquid and are they truly insolvent, meaning if we could transparently see that and audit ourselves in terms of proof of reserves or whatever, maybe even with Merkle proofs, which is this mathematical proof that a company can give while hiding, the actual composition and underlying stuff, then people don't necessarily need to panic. We just need to create more transparency. And actually, in that sense, I think DeFi is a bit of an unfortunate name, because a lot in DeFi is not necessarily decentralized. But I think, and a lot of Bitcoiners especially like to riff about that, but I think that's really beyond the purpose. In my opinion, DeFi is a terrible term. It should probably be something like VFi, verifiable finance. And Chris Berniski had a tweet about this today or yesterday. He said, let's not call it DeFi, but let's call it IFS, Internet Financial System. He
Hmm.
called.
I
And
saw
so I
that.
like those terms more than DeFi. DeFi has a lot of like weight and it triggers people, it's not decentralized, or, oh, what is this clown bit? Those. And so, yeah, maybe we have to move away from that. I don't know.
It's a very interesting question. Yeah, I saw that tweet too. I don't love it on the sense that Ethereans talk about we're the internet of value. And so when I think of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is the only asset that really, well, stablecoins too, but they transcend into the real world in a real way. Um, so it plays dual purposes. But yeah, I definitely see the limitations of DeFi, the term, where it comes with baggage. Because you think about decentralization and censorship resistant and unfuckwittable money, and that's cool. That's all great. But the real thing we're trying to solve for is like it's trust. At the core of
Right.
it, it is trust. Like I don't have to trust you; it just works, and I trust that I can audit the protocol and not have to trust that what the Fed is doing in hand wavy deals behind the
Yep.
scenes. But we don't think about that when we think of DeFi. It's just assumed. It's kind of bolted on.
Exactly. No, completely agree. Yeah. And more so, I think DeFi is in a really tough spot, actually, because this is a philosophical question more than anything, but is there product market fit in DeFi? If I ask you today, what DeFi protocol would you want use day to day? And then to take it a step further, trust your life savings with. I don't know if I can count those on a even a few fingers. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
It's all still very speculative.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I made it a point in the past month because I talk about so many different side chains and stuff, but I don't use them. I use
Yeah.
Stacks. I've been using Stacks, but I've never really touched Sovereign. I've heard of good things about Interlay and how they built their bridge, but I've never, created the wallet and deployed even $100 of BTC. So I made the point to do that. Sovereign's pretty solid. I'm not sure if I would, if I had a massive net worth, I still not sure if I'd be doing it off of anything besides just storing in my ledger, like that feels like the
Mm.
best, even risk adjusted, that's supposed to be the safest bet. But also play with Arkadiko and got to see like how the collaterals change depending on the asset you're holding. It's very clear. Almost got liquidated on stats because there was a lot of volatility. So I had to deploy some more collateral. So I got to learn, I got the crash course really early. Um, so yeah, but it does feel like it is much more clear of what you're getting into, which is really, really nice. Um, Okay, so I want to get into what you guys have built then, and maybe a two-part question. Because one, I'm really interested why you built on Stack, especially in the time you did, where you're part of cohort one of the accelerator. You're one of the earliest like useful programs to use on Stacks. It was like stacking, and then kind of NFTs with Boom, and then Arkadiko launched pretty early as like the first real use case. So why Stacks at the time that you chose it? Because that seems like a big decision, and then you can kind of lead into what is it that you built with Arkadiko.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Look, for me, Stacks ultimately was pretty easy. So my current co-founders, Peter and Neil, we were talking, and that was end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And like I said, I've been into Bitcoin since 2013, but only really serious since 2019. And in 2019, that's probably important to answer the why Stacks question. I did sell my company, which was a SaaS company in human resources. And I mean, I made some money, not crazy, not life changing, but the money comes into your bank and you have to start thinking, what do I do with this money? Am I going to keep it in euros? 'Cause that's our currency, or am I going to put it in stocks or maybe bonds? Or then I was like, okay, I need to do something smart with this. So I start reading more seriously into Bitcoin. And so I became somewhat of a Bitcoin maxi over those 2018, 2019, 2020 years. And so for me, it was really out of the question to build something on Ethereum or Solana or something else, even though I think they have their place in the crypto world these days. But I still think Bitcoin makes a lot of sense and stacks as well. And so I was telling my two co-founders, look, I want to build something, but I only want to do it on Bitcoin. And where do you really go? As you just said, you have RSK and you have Liquid. Uh, but I didn't really like the RSK experience, to be honest, to be completely transparent. I found it very cumbersome to create RBTC, which is the pagan version of Bitcoin, but on RSK. I had to send it to some like weird address and then wait. And that was 2 years ago. I don't know if it's still the case, but wait like half a day. And then I received my RBTC on a MetaMask wallet. And I was like, okay, I don't really feel comfortable like programming in this. So I didn't do it. Liquid, to be fairly honest, it's kind of dead. So didn't really give it a good look to begin with. And I really like Manip from a personal, like from let's say a point of view where I listened to a podcast with him, with Nick Carter of Castle Island Ventures still back then. And he was explaining how they're gonna, or they were gonna be launching Stacks 2.0, the mainnet. So that was, yeah, early 2021. And I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna build something, play around with the smart contracts. I kind of like the idea of clarity. And I wanted to have some fun. No one was building on stacks. So it's like, why is that? And I wanted to figure that out. And that had to do with it. And then I spoke to Trevor a few months later, maybe in April of the same year. So like 2, 3 months later. And he told me something that I still remember and I agree with. And he told me, look, do you guys want to be a big whale or fish in a small pond? And that's small today. Or do you want to be, like a nobody in something like Ethereum? And philosophically, as I said, I align with Bitcoin, and adding, that saying to it. I was like, let's just go for it. Let's do it. And so we didn't really look back because I had just sold my company. I had some runway personally where I could hack on things for a few months. And so we did that, and we raised a round. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. I don't remember your second question, but
It was about what Arkadiko is, but before we get there, I actually am really curious because the thought. So I've been asking people the same question about like why build where you're building, and most people have the opposite, where it's like they're much more inclined. Well, I guess I wouldn't say much more inclined because nobody really builds on RSK either, and definitely not on Liquid. But it's easy if you're from Solidity and you want to do that. There's decent tooling to build RSK, so there's a decent uh, carrot to dangle there. But the altcoin on stacks is a big deterrent for certain people. So why, if your ethos is Bitcoin, uh, were you so okay building when there's a gas token of STX?
dude, that's a really good question. I think I really dislike the people that say that there should only be one thing, and that's Bitcoin, because ultimately the biggest shit going on earth is maybe the US dollar if you want to hoard it, as a savings tool. And so there's people like Michael Saylor who are, you know, some people think he's a god, right? They're like, oh, Michael Saylor, oh my God. And actually, I really liked him too, especially in the beginning. But what is the guy doing? Is leveraging himself, getting dollars and turning those dollars into more Bitcoin. So he's literally creating shit coins, the US dollar in this case, to acquire more Bitcoin. And I think that's ethically wrong. I'm not using stacks necessarily to acquire more Bitcoin, but maybe some are, right? And I really like the idea. And there's this meme on Twitter there where you have a donkey that shits coins, and the donkey is like the stacks network, and it shits Bitcoin. And it's like, this is awesome. I can have a tool, almost a coin that I can hold, and it shits Bitcoin. It's like the same thing. I can leverage my stock or my company to borrow USD, US dollars, and get more Bitcoin. And I'm like, what is ethically different about that? If you think about it, right? Ethically, I don't really see a difference, personal opinion. And so that's one thing. And I think the other is, as Manip so often says, the incentives are just aligned. You kind of need a token to bootstrap a network. If you want to attract builders, you need some speculative thing that can grow and that can give you some leverage. And just purely with Bitcoin, um, I think that's pretty hard. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to have a coin. And one last thing I want to say is, I believe in the free world. I mean, I don't believe that you should be allowed to like create misinformation and cheat on people, but I do believe that with the right information, putting it out there, that everyone should make the decision whether they want to hold something or not. But there shouldn't be a god or one person that says, no, you cannot create this coin or you cannot do this. If people represent information truthfully, as I think Stacks has always done, then what's the problem there ethically? I don't think there is a problem. But yeah.
Well said. Yeah, also I think back then Liquid is clearly federated. RSK was more federated back then. Now they have some hardware module. So Stacks was the first one that was kind of pushing this like open membership model, although you had to hold Stacks. So it's like there's pros and cons to everything. But yeah, I find that interesting as well. But for the sake of time, I want to jump into what is Arkadiko. So you're on Stacks, you're blazing a trail, you want to tinker, you're following your curiosity, but also building on Bitcoin. And so you decide to build a stablecoin protocol. So what went into that decision, and what is Arkadiko?
Yeah, so in one sense, Arkadiko is a way for you to borrow money against your own crypto in the form of a stablecoin. There's different ways to pitch this, but I think that's the ultimate use case. And for me, the biggest proof of product market fit, lending is the biggest use case in DeFi. And so we were thinking, like, I think actually the best DeFi use case today is where you can collateralize your crypto, so stacks, let's say an SDX token, and borrow something that's the most stable, like USDT or USDC. But when we got started, there was no stable coin. There was no USDC or USDT on stacks. And I was like, what is the second best way to make it easy for people to borrow against their own holdings without having to sell those? They want liquidity, but they're bullish on stacks, and they're like, this thing is going to go to $100 piece, but I want to borrow against it. And so it's like, that's a pretty cool use case. And so that's why, honestly, we built our own stablecoin. And the second thing I think is the stablecoin is something that I talked about this a bit, right? But if you look at the people of Venezuela, Turkey, maybe like Syria, Lebanon, people who are just like me and you were like happily chatting here peacefully, and then they are a bit less fortunate, and they see double to triple digit inflation year over year, but they do not have easy access to the dollar. And something in my mind also said, and I don't think USDA is there or is the best stable coin to do that today, but maybe in a year or 2 years it could be, right? If stacks grows a lot, there's more liquidity on it. Maybe we have a ton of Turks and Lebanese people and Venezuelans holding USDA because they need access to that dollar. They think crypto might be too volatile for their day-to-day stuff. Maybe you save in it, or I save in it perhaps because that's money I don't need for the next 2-3 years. But I'm not going to put my personally risk adjusted. I'm not going to put my last cent into Bitcoin. It's just too volatile for me to do that. And I think a lot of people think like that, but they still want to have access to something semi-reliable to do their day-to-day, operations with. And that's also what was in my head. And I was like, if I can do something, there's three things what I want, which is fun, which we have talked about a bit already. Is I want to make money. Why am I doing something semi or potentially lucrative? I want to make money with it. So I want to have fun. I want to make money, and I want to learn something. And the third thing, learning something, it's very complicated in terms of design to create a stablecoin. For instance, Arkadiko today, there's about 40 smart contracts that work all together with liquidations and margin positions and oracles and like all those things. And I think, by the way, we should keep DeFi as simple as possible. But there was no other way for me, at least, to build it in a way that was as simple as possible. And so those three things really hit the sweet spot for me: having fun, making money, and learning something. And yeah, that's why I think ultimately I'm still working on Arkadiko, and hopefully I will be the next 5 to 10 years.
I love that. I love your three kind of like life aims for this: fun, money, and learning. I think I'm gonna get that frame myself because I think those are hard to beat. Money in the middle, gotta have it, but fun and learning, crucial. Um, it does sound like there's two. I'm just thinking about this as you're talking about it. There's like the people who don't really have collateral or a ton of money, and they just need up their current money to stay stable. So they will get into a stable coin for that reason. And so they might hold USD. USDT is the biggest by far, and it's probably for that reason. They're not collateralizing USDT. They're just using it to spend whenever they need it for their daily actions. Versus the other person, who is someone like me using Arkadiko, where I actually have collateral and I'm minting a stable coin to go do other stuff with it and extend that use case. And I haven't thought about, so there is kind of two main use cases, and they work in tandem to keep the stable coin stable. But I don't know what one is more of an active participant and one's more passive, and maybe that's the wrong way to think about it. Does that make sense at all?
I agree. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And additionally, this is not something that a lot of people will like, but USDA is not something that can work in isolation. To keep our peg, we need to arbitrage it almost constantly. And to arbitrage something, you need liquidity, and you need something to arbitrage it against. And that thing that we need to arbit against today is USDC usually, which is, well, XUSD, which is wrapped USDC on stacks, right? And so that's the way for people to redeem real dollars. And so my point of view is always if you can really use the protocol as it was intended, meaning you create your own vault and mint your own USDA, that's today probably better than buying USDA, from the open market. Because if you vault your own USDA, then you are in charge of repaying that debt yourself, whether you use a stack seal to do that or you pay it back over time. But you always know that at the time of minting, you get those dollars, whatever you do with those dollars. But if it would, you know, temporarily go under back, it's easier for you to pay it back because your debt has become cheaper, right? It's like the reverse of inflation almost on USDA. And so I'm not gonna lie to someone and say like, oh, USDA is like the best and most amazing product out there, because it's not. And transparently, the chain shows you that. But I think it will be a product that will have sufficient stability in the future if and when sufficient liquidity comes in, especially in terms of USDC and other centralized stablecoins. So for those people who want to hold USDA and want USDC to die, I think that's a pretty like tough, tough environment for us to be in. And that doesn't mean we're not decentralized, because again, you can mint your own USDA and not ever touch USDC. But for stability purposes, we really need those. I don't know if I went off on a tangent, but that's important to keep in mind, I believe, together with those two kind of use cases that you mentioned.
No, that makes sense. It kind of dovetails into the tweet you had recently about on-chain activity and the importance of it. And that actually was one of the ones that prompted me to try Arkadiko. I was like, you know what? It's been sitting in my wallet, so let me go put this to use. And now I'm fully bought in. I love the idea of stacking cycles. Instead of just doing it myself on Xverse, put on Arkadiko, get more benefits. Win-win for me, and it works. It works pretty solid. And I like the idea of collateralized stablecoins. You've sold me on that. Um, People hype up Bitcoin-backed stablecoins a lot. Sovereign's about to launch one called Dollar, and so I think in the Bitcoin space, crypto space, they treat it as like a panacea almost. Like once we get a good Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, all things will be better. And as I'm listening to you, it sounds like Bitcoin is the safest asset in crypto, but it still has massive volatility, especially when it runs or it drops. So is it subject to all largely the same issues of any kind of other collateral for a collateralized stablecoin?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's just some kind of like weird fetish almost that people have with Bitcoin. I mean, I agree that it's the most decentralized and it's the best asset to hold probably in crypto still as of today. But I don't see anything fundamentally different from a technical point of view and a volatility point of view. So I think the reason why people look at it as a holy grail is because no one has done it before, and people look at Bitcoin and they say, and I agree with that, it's the best brand in crypto by far. Everyone knows Bitcoin, even my like whatever, my mother, she knows what Bitcoin is, but she doesn't know Ethereum maybe or Solana, but she knows Bitcoin. She knows that's some like magic internet money kind of thing. So that's great to leverage that brand name. But in terms of volatility, people don't like to hear this, but even Ethereum, has had the same volatility or maybe a bit less than Bitcoin. If you look at the BTC ETH ratio, it's been so strong. I'm not saying for good reasons, but we cannot live in isolation anymore. I'm not an Ethereum fan, but it's persistent, man. It's gonna stay there. And if you're a builder on Bitcoin, even if you're a user on one of those Bitcoin chains, try some other ecosystems. I always say to anyone who wants to listen to me, I always say for me, there's four ecosystems today. There's Bitcoin and Bitcoin layers. And I really like the job that you did, with comparing Arkadiko and Alex to like RSK and Lightning and all those things. Think tremendous job there. But not a lot of people in stacks and in Bitcoin generally do that. They're like so isolated even within stacks that they don't want to expand to RSK and Liquid. And I told you the reason I started building on stacks is because I compared them. And I thought stacks is superior, it's more flexible, it's good programming language clarity, and there's some speculation in it. But if you extend that even further and you look at, as I said, the four ecosystems, right? Bitcoin, EVM, so for Ethereum virtual machine, In my opinion, Solana belongs as a third, not Solana as a chain necessarily, but the virtual machine, SVM. Or maybe you could group the fast blockchains there, like Sui, Aptos, Solana. Now, in my opinion, you have a fourth one, Cosmos, where there are more specific app chains. And I think those four are really important to categorize and to understand that apps exist there that have serious adoption and often more adoption than any Bitcoin layer today. That doesn't mean there's no opportunity in Bitcoin, but it's important to recognize, that there is a lot of building going on in those three others as well. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The more I got out of stacks and looked at Bitcoin broadly, I saw how dogmatic I was being with stacks. And obviously, like when it comes to my ratios, I'm probably like 50-50 as far as portfolio. And so, like, I have a heavy incentive for stacks to go up. I want it to go up. So you have to like make sure your bag holding bias is not too strong. And, but it did strike me that whenever you switch to an ecosystem, even if tons of people are using it, the market cap is strong, like you could give good directional incentives to say this is probably safe. There's something about having to create that wallet and have to hold another key now. And I don't really know the ecosystem that it feels like I'm trusting. I don't until I know enough, I'm trusting something. And so it feels weird. And I'm feeling this right now where like I tried RSK, merge mining stats are pretty good. Like half the network is merge mining. So that looks pretty solid. And then there's a new one. I talked to Alexi yesterday, who's the co-founder of Interlay, and they're built on Polkadot, which like I don't know anything about. I know about they have something called parachains, and they have
mhm.
like these two sub networks. People seem to like the construction of it. Sounds interesting. Um, I'm gonna try it with a small amount of money. But if it wasn't for people like Tycho and others that are like, hey, this guy's pretty smart. I like the way he's constructing things, and I get him on, I hear him talk, I would never try Interlay. No
Right.
chance. And so there's something about that, I don't know, there's such a strong it's a big lift to move to an ecosystem. Even if, Avalanche has BTCB, which everyone's talking about, it's like the cross-chain Bitcoin. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we need to try to remove our bias, like you say, from our bags and from our own opinions, really. And I've been really bad at that as a Bitcoin maxi. I do admit that, but it depends how you look at it as well. If you're a user, you don't really care about number go up that much, which is not a lot of people, but most people they went into Solana, for instance, because it just bumps like crazy, right? But if you decouple Sol, the token, and the tokenomics from Solana, the chain, I think there's still amazing technology there without wanting to say that Stacks is superior or inferior or whatever. I just want to say Stacks is amazing and I love building on it because it has certain properties such as proof of transfer, such as the Bitcoin ethos and the culture. But Solana, also, if you don't care that much about decentralization and the ethos and you just care about speed and quite frankly, UX, I haven't really used, something that has as good UX as Solana, then there's merit in that as well. And so they have both their pros and cons and choose your own flavor, I would say. But yeah.
Right. Okay. We got about 10 minutes or so left. I want to start to close this down. We talked about Arkadiko, which you guys have built up to this point. But what's going on forward? So we're on a week away from Stacks 2.1 launching. Some people are super hyped about it. Some people it's being rushed or it doesn't give as much as people say it does. Different opinions. But yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts on 2.1, and then we can kind of dovetail into what are you guys building? What's the plan for Arkadiko in the next 12 months or so?
2.1. Oh man. Um, there's some
I saw your tweet, so I did lead you a little bit. I'm very curious of your thoughts.
Uh, um, let me first say that everyone who has deep conviction on anything, I deeply respect. Whether you're Michael Saylor or a soul lonely builder in your own little room in your mom's basement, it doesn't really matter for me. Having said that, I do think on some things the ball was dropped slightly. I think it's kind of and I have to elaborate there, right? So with Stacks 2.1, we're finally going to see continuous stacking. And that means that currently, if you participate in proof of transfer, you have to choose a number of cycles that you want to stack from 1 to 12. And after those cycles that you chose, you're in a cooldown period. So you don't earn yield in that period after the number of cycles that you chose. And so we're supposedly moving to continuous stacking. That means you can unstack or add more stacks without, being exposed to that cooldown cycle. And so a few days ago or yesterday, even I found out that you cannot decrease a partial position. So either you take everything out or you keep on stacking and extend things. But that means if I tomorrow stack 10,000 STX, I have to make a decision whether I want to keep all of them in or take all of them out. I cannot, say, okay, now I need some liquidity. I need to sell 10% of my position. So I'm going to take 1,000 out and the rest I'm going to leave stacking. I need to take all of it out, miss one cycle, and then sell 1,000 and restack those 9,000. And for me, that's not really continuous, and that for me is a bit of a downside. I understand, that there's compromise and there's limited time and all those things. And again, I deeply respect core engineers who, especially in the beginning, worked on this, because they found it intellectually stimulating. So no attack against anyone in particular, but I think that also misses an opportunity to create a real liquid staking derivative token, an LSD, as we call it. Because if you can partially decrease positions, how is a protocol built around that going to be able to, handle the inflow and outflow of tokens without deploying an infinite number of arbitrary contracts that keep on stacking? So that really limits, in my opinion, the growth opportunities that Stacks had going for it with Stacks 2.1. Unfortunately, I think that's a bit of a shortcoming, but there's a lot of good things shipping as well in Stacks 2.1, such as new clarity functions and things like that. So the programming language has gotten better. You can read documentation if that interests you. I'm not the expert on that, but I see good things and bad things. Ultimately, I'm happy it's just finally shipping because it was a long way coming.
Yeah, when I saw your tweet, I was definitely disappointed. The continuous stacking is great because the one of the downsides to stacking is that you do lock up your. If you go for 12 cycles and you want to maximize your yield, you are going to sit in this volatile asset while you're getting your yield. So yeah, you'll get some BTC drip, and that's fantastic. But if stacks goes boom, and maybe I want to pull some profits, or if it drops like crazy, you have less options. And so you either got to choose, go for the full, hands off approach. And I was really excited. And you can still do it somewhat with continuous stacking, where like I'll just deploy 1,000 stacks and I'll just do it for 2 weeks, and I'll just keep sending those. Like transaction fees are super low on stacks right now. So like I can just spend that half a penny and keep the cycle going 2 week cycles until I still have the optionality. But it does suck that I can't just deploy a $13,000 bag or whatever. And then that's if I want to pull out some of that, I got to pull out all of it and lose a 2 week cycle.
Yeah, and look, there are workarounds on it, right? You could split up the 10,000 STX in 10 wallets and stack 10 times. That requires more maintenance as well.
Can you do that on Arkadiko or no? One vault is one vault when it comes to one collateral type.
Yeah, 1 volt is 1 volt within a collateral type. And so the complexity that we have is we have hundreds to thousands of people every 2 weeks coming in, right? And they say, I want to add 100 stacks and earn some yield on that. The other is 100,000, the other is 500. An arbitrary number of people stacking an arbitrary number of tokens. And so we have to pull those somehow and maximize the yield for you. And so then you can see, I guess, that partially decreasing a position is vital for us in terms of not losing yield for other users. But now we have to figure out and implement some kind of compromise where we still have some yield and need to think how much can we stack there and how much should we stack there. And so we're going to be ending up deploying multiple stackers and try to estimate, how much should be stacked there and there, so that we don't get a bank run, because everyone should have access to their liquid stacks, right? And it should be transparent, but at the same time that we have yield going and that we don't lose yield to users who still wanted to stack. Because for them, it doesn't matter. They're like, I gave you 1,000 stacks. You told me the yield was approximately 5%. Why do I only have 3.8 or 4.2. I'm like, yeah, that's because of this and that. They don't care. They just
Right.
want to. Then I agree with them. So
Yeah. Okay. Um, so what else would come to this year? So like you're going to deploy continuous stacking, you're going to input that into it. What else is on the roadmap?
I think the biggest milestone for us is twofold. A new product that allows you to borrow against Bitcoin natively with DLCs. That's something we have pretty much ready in terms of proof of concept. Whether you'll be able to borrow USDA or XUSD, we're not quite sure yet. But you'll be able to borrow a stablecoin against a DLC position. So that's, I think, really exciting because as far as I know, we're one of the first DeFi protocols to ever do that, independently of chain against native Bitcoin. No wrapping, no counterparty risk and all those things. And then second, there's a tokenomics rework. So Deco, you can stake it today. Deco is the governance token of the Arkadiko protocol. You can stake that with us. Up until now, it was purely a governance token used to vote. We're going to put in a revenue share component where if you stake it, any USDA that the protocol makes, so people borrow, right? And they pay an interest on whatever they borrow. That interest, as far as, up to today, has always gone to paying expenses for the team and things. Going forward, once we do that tokenomics rework, all that USDA will be pro rata distributed to people staking their Deco. So I think that's pretty exciting as well.
That's very cool. Yeah, I keep hearing about DLCs and it's like it's always like on the cusp. Things are about to launch. And it seems like now we're really close to seeing some real new use cases. And I think I heard one of the big blockers too is wallet support, but it looks like
Yeah,
X might be good to go now.
exactly. Yeah. Infrastructure was always lacking. And now it's finally there. And I'm excited to see it. Yeah. And I'm going to use it for my own use cases. So yeah, let's go.
Let's go. LFG. Okay, last question. This has been a fantastic talk. Thank you for dropping knowledge on us. Just a broad question. Out of all the things going on in Bitcoin, you're following fun money and learning. Out of all the things you're kind of watching right now, what are you most excited about in the Bitcoin space? In any facet that you're kind of like watching?
It's a tough question, man. Um, I think probably Ordinals and how they will evolve. I hope, really great artists come, and ultimately what I believe in, for better or for worse, is the financialization of all assets. We tokenize anything we can think of, whether that's good or bad. I'll leave in the middle, but I'm excited to see how Ordinals will grow if there's any big project. Because, yeah, you had Yuga do this drop, but I don't know if you saw the reception of it. The art was kind of meh. It wasn't great, wasn't amazing, and I hope just more people, will come to Ordinals, see growing market cap, see financial applications around it. Um, that's one thing, and I think another narrative that is not living at all is actually mobile, because it's very cringe, but people always say, "Yeah, let's onboard the next billion users." Dude, the next billion users are not gonna download your Hero or MetaMask wallets. They're on their phone, either out working or sitting in the sofa at night, and they're gonna scroll a bit around, and they're not gonna open an Arkadiko position and read 10 pages of tokenomics. That's for your hardcore user base, let's say. And I think that's fine. You have those subsets, right? But I think to really onboard and to get a real narrative, I want to see some mobile usage. And I've been having this idea of building an Ordinals with kind of like a Tinder UX. You open the app, you see Ordinals, and you swipe left or right. And you're like, oh, this is cool. This Ordinal I like. And you have your own little profile of things that you liked. Maybe you can even buy them in the app, those kind of things. So I think if X first keeps on growing, they have a good mobile wallet, you can integrate that in other apps on iOS, Android. Yeah. Who knows? But that could be a big narrative for me. So the combination of mobile and Ordinals, promising in my opinion.
I like it. I like it. Very cool. Okay, well, fantastic. To close this out, where people listen to all this, they want to try out what you guys are building with Arkadiko, where's the best place to go?
You can find us on Twitter, Arkadiko Finance. That's one word. Or you can go to arkadiko.finance to try it out. Follow me on Twitter for hot takes. You can do that as well. And I would love to have anyone who has questions on Discord. We're also on Telegram. So once you're on our Twitter, again, Arkadiko Finance, then feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And we're always happy to help. One last thing, by the way, I started this year doing these 30-minute calls with anyone, with founders, or just with random people, honestly, who want to chat and share ideas. Been doing that with about 10 people so far this year. It's always fun. Not a lot of people reach out, but the ones that do are usually really like high quality, great conversations. So if you just want to chat about even moving to Spain or doing something, happy to have a conversation.
I love it. Yeah, I think I saw a tweet about having a deep ethos of doing things that don't scale, and I love that. Not enough people do it nowadays. I always ask the question of like, what's the silver bullet? What's the highest leverage thing? And it's like sometimes it's just getting in the mud and just do it, some getting dirty. Just do
Do
the
the
damn
work.
work. Yep,
Exactly.
100%, 100%. Okay, well, for those listening, all the links will be below for everything just mentioned. Man, this has been fascinating. Thank you for dropping so many gems about protocol design and stable coins and everything else. So, Philip, thank you so much, man.
Thanks for your time as well. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Built on Bitcoin.
I know that things don't always go your way, but I'll be right here waiting. I've been waiting now. I've been trying to figure out a way to make it out, cause I don't think about